Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Steiner, and today I have Wyatt Amsbacher with me. Today, we have the privilege of welcoming Mr. Martin Babinec, a Shippensburg University alumni and a titan in the world of entrepreneurship. Mr. Babinec's journey is a testament to the transformative power of perseverance, vision, and unwavering dedication. He is the founding CEO of TriNet, an HR solutions company that has grown to $6 billion in annual revenue, going public on the New York Stock Exchange in 2014. In doing so, Martin carved a path of success that reshaped the landscape of business support services for small to medium-sized enterprises. Beyond his remarkable achievements in building a company from scratch, Martin is a passionate advocate for entrepreneurship and economic development. He founded and serves as a lead board member for nonprofits Upstate Venture Connect and Entrepreneurs Across Borders. Both organizations catalyze startup ecosystems across broad geographies by connecting people and resources to help entrepreneurs grow scalable businesses in underdeveloped markets. This experience led Martin to author an influential book, More Good Jobs, an entrepreneur's action plan to create change in your community. His book not only reflects his profound insights into job creation and economic revitalization, but also serves as a guiding light for individuals and organizations seeking to make a meaningful impact in the world of business.
What sets Mr. Babinec apart is not just his successful entrepreneurial journey, but his unwavering dedication to giving back and paying it forward. With his role in politics as an independent candidate for U.S. Congress, underscored his commitment to job creation and giving back to the community, in an effort that led to him founding the United New York, a nonprofit dedicated to electoral reform to strengthen our democracy.
Today, Martin joins us to share his wealth of knowledge, experiences, and insights gained from his extraordinary journey. So without further ado, let's extend a warm welcome to Mr. Martin Babinec.
Gosh, it's painful to sit through such a long introduction, so I got to remember to shorten that, guys. But happy to be here. Thank you for having me. All right.
So let's just get started. You being a Shippensburg alumni, maybe just take us back to you graduating from Shippensburg. Take us through a few key milestones along the way, from where you started to the success that you have now.
Where do you want to start?
So let's just start with, what was your major here at Shippensburg University, and maybe what your job was after graduating?
So I came into Shippensburg as a transfer student. So I was a community college graduate in upstate New York, and then came to Shippensburg as a business major, specifically for what was then called behavioral management, because I was committed to the field of being in HR. So 2 years at Shippensburg certainly helped put me on the right path in one sense of strengthening my desire to be in HR as a career. But then I ran into the roadblock because when I graduated, I couldn't find any company interested in hiring me. So it was a really long time. It took me almost a year to get my first job.
Wow.
And I got rejected by about 300 companies in that process. But everything happened for a reason, and I ended up taking a job as a civilian working for the U.S. Navy. And they actually gave me great training and great opportunity that I just will never look back on. And not only because I got to learn a lot from some people that first I worked directly for and trained under, but they gave me a chance to be a manager pretty early in my career. Then within 2 years, I was actually managing a small department and then moved several times. So I managed larger HR departments. And even better was the fact that I got a chance to work outside the US. So I spent almost 7 years outside the US, both Asia and Europe. And the life experience of working in other cultures and dealing with HR in other cultures really shaped my career.
That's great.
That's amazing. What made the jump for you to transition from being an HR manager to becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, you know what happens for most entrepreneurs? We're not employable, right? And that happened to me. So here I had this, career projection through the 11 years I worked for the Navy as a civilian. But when I came back from overseas, nobody wanted to hire me because they did not value what I was capable of doing. And so I started looking around at other opportunities, and after more than a year of trying to find a different job, getting out of the kind of the US government work and into corporate work, and that wasn't working, I started spending more time looking at starting my own company. And in those days, where there wasn't a lot of information available like you can find today, because remember, it was an analog world, all right? No World Wide Web, all right? No real good way to get information in ways that you take for granted now.
Right.
What really made a difference was my attending a conference where I learned the existence of what was then just a few companies providing an HR outsourcing business to small to medium-sized businesses. And I knew a lot about HR by that point, didn't know anything about sales, but that was the genesis of, hey, there's some companies actually doing this, providing this service in a model that no one ever heard of before. Because in those days, it was, I thought I was starting a small business providing just HR outsourcing. What I did not realize was it really was a startup, because there's a difference between a traditional small business and a startup. And I, at that point, did not even understand that.
Wow, that's awesome. So, leading into that, into, your entrepreneurial journey, what led you to start TriNet?
Well, because in those days, there were not the kind of digital assets that we create businesses around today, but I knew more about human resource information systems, even though it was not connected in the web as you think of today. But I did know a little bit about HRIS. And the idea of, instead of going the traditional hang up a consulting shingle route that most of my peers in HR management were doing. They want to be an entrepreneur, they had an HR background. Hey, I'll be a consultant. Right. I didn't know much about business models back then, but somehow figured out this was not the direction that made sense for me. What I really wanted to build was a company that would not be dependent on my billable hour as the only way to make revenue. So when I came across the existence of this kind of nascent industry, which today is called the professional employer organization industry, the whole thing made a lot of sense to me. And that's what caused me to make the jump.
Great. So, specifically with TriNet, can you just tell a little bit about what your customers are and what do you guys do for them?
So even today, TriNet still serves small to medium-sized businesses, but our focus in the entire 20 years I was the CEO was exclusively emerging growth technology companies backed by private equity investors. So that meant I was working with growth companies, helping growth entrepreneurs build businesses. And, over the last 20 years, or maybe the last 15 years since I stepped down as CEO, the business is diversified a bit, so we cover some other sectors, but typically white collar and higher paid employees, where we aggregate the employees of today about 17,000 companies into one group and actually handle all the headaches of being an employer, paid under our payroll and tax ID number, sponsoring the benefit plans, and managing the risk as an employer. So we're absolutely an employer for about 360,000 employees, all under our payroll.
Wow, that's great. And, I just had one more question with that. When was that first started? When did you first start TriNet?
1988.
Wow.
Wow.
It's awesome.
Did you have the support of your friends and family when you started TriNet?
Yeah, there's no doubt behind any entrepreneur that starts a business that grows, there's going to be other people involved. It's one thing to just do your own thing, but if you start building something requiring a team, it usually requires more resources. So yes, help from our family, both my parents, my wife's parents, and her dad was an entrepreneur, which was a huge asset that I came to appreciate. was really key. We also brought on as our first employee somebody that had worked for me for the role that I had previously with Navy Exchanges. And I had a commitment there. And then lo and behold, I actually met my next door neighbor and found his interest in being an entrepreneur. And he became my business partner over time in a very important role as a combined COO and CFO.
Wow.
Yeah. How did you go about raising funding in these early stages?
So the very first raise that we did was in 1990 as we were about to run out of cash. And that is a scenario that all too many entrepreneurs can find themselves in. And it's a long and tortuous story, but let me say we found them because I was out in the community being very active, trying to build a business. And from the people we were trying to sell as customers, we found some investors, did an actual pitch event, brought in some help, including my next door neighbor, and also somebody that was a key advisor for us. And we raised a total of $50,000 in that first round.
Wow.
And I'll tell you the difference between my being able to share the story versus going out of business was because of that first round of financing.
Right. Right.
So after that, how did bringing in more investors go on?
Well, I probably raised 8 rounds of financing. So it really goes by stage. And the further up the capital stack you go, meaning the more dollars you raise, then the more complicated it becomes.
Right.
And so it's learned stage by stage. And also, as you raise larger and larger amounts of money, it requires more sophisticated investors who are writing those checks. So they go through a lot more thorough due diligence and how the contracts are written. So it gets more and more complicated as you grow larger, up
Right.
to including the most complicated would become going public.
Yeah. That's great. So once you started raising money from, your investors, how did that change your view in operating the business overall?
From that very first round of just $50,000, for
Mhm.
which now, if you can imagine, the cap table was me, and we have some small investors, and the company wasn't valued very high, but it was not a large amount that was raised.
Right.
But there were team members that also had stock options because they believed in what we were building, and they had enough faith in me that they took the risk of taking lower salaries for the opportunity to share in the upside. They believed in it. So as soon as we took that money on, you might say, my total focus was on making sure that between the team members and the investors who placed their faith in me, I was all about making sure that they were repaid and then some. And that became the driving force for everything else I did in growing the company.
Wow. That's amazing. Putting the employees first and having employees that believe in what you're starting to is very important.
And it's got to be not just for the employees, but the investors, because
Right.
they took a lot of risk. There was not much to show for where our company was at. We were about to go out of business. We were on the proverbial edge and ready to go out of business. So there was a lot of risk for them too.
Wow. So, leading into that, talking about some challenges as you navigate TriNet, what were some key event or milestones on TriNet's journey that were particularly challenging for you personally?
So once we got through the near-death experience and had some challenges meeting our revenue targets, by the way, after selling a majority of the company in a later round financing in 1995, we got through those challenges, but we got to a challenge of growth during what we call the dot-com era. If you know your history, when did the World Wide Web come out in the marketplace and start to take the world by storm, including the financial world? And remember, My business was all about focusing on emerging tech companies backed by private equity financing. So we effectively rode up the dot-com wave of growth that began in 1995. All right. And it was like a rocket ship.
Right.
There was more demand for what we were doing than our capabilities could deliver. So if you were on the sales team at TriNet, you loved it. Okay. You could close deals on the phone. All right. But if you're on the delivery side of the business, and this is a business that depends on doing things like getting the payroll right and other things, that is, there's not much room for error. It was a real challenge. So that was I won't say it was a near-death experience, but it was a big challenge, and it required a lot of commitment to just stay and try to keep the team together, as there was a lot of frustration with our not being at scale, even though we had all this demand that we were having a hard time fulfilling. That was a big challenge. And for me personally too. And then the second probably major challenge is that we rode that wave all the way up. And then if you know your history, what happened in the year 2000? The air started coming out of the dot-com bubble, and then everything started going down. And we were then shrinking as fast as the prior 5 years we were growing. We were, instead of going up, we were now going down as rapidly as the previous 5 years we were going up. And that was like the worst possible scenario for an entrepreneur. You cannot imagine how hard it is to be in the situation where people that have done their absolute best and were faithful, loyal, hardworking, doing everything they were asked to do, and because of the macro forces surrounding us, our business was cratering. Most companies in that situation did not survive, and we did, but I would not want to wish it on anybody.
It's awesome.
When did you step down as CEO?
So I stepped down from being CEO in 2008 and transitioned as chairman. I was full-time chairman for a while. And I just stepped off the board of directors in 2022. So it was a pretty long run.
What was it like? Just the transition from CEO to chairman to board member?
So it really worked out well because when you're the CEO in charge of, let's say the team at that time was over 1,000, maybe about 1,200 employees. All right.
That's amazing.
And so there's a lot going on, and we're back on a growth trajectory, on a serious growth trajectory, and the challenges are certainly there. So it's an always-on situation. But over the course of that journey, I had also moved my family from Silicon Valley, where we started the company, to my home area of upstate New York. So I was commuting for a long time. And so I was looking forward. I wasn't supposed to be commuting long, but I was looking forward to doing less of that. And so as the circumstances evolved, it was the right move to bring in an executive more capable than me for the very rapid growth stage that we were then going to be embarking on. And my successor, Burton Goldfield, did a fabulous job. He just retired this year, just about 8 weeks ago. All right. And did a fantastic job throughout his tenure. So yeah, that transition to chairman went smoothly, and it allowed me to plan on what my next chapters would be. So that gave me some luxury to really think hard about what I want to do with the rest of my life, right? And where would I make a difference? And I'm still working through that, but I'm having fun.
Good. It's always good to hear. So kind of switching it up a little bit. I think a good question to be answered is, what was the hardest sacrifice in terms of time that you struggled with throughout this journey?
Well, clearly when I was on the road commuting from upstate New York to Silicon Valley, which, by the way, you cannot take a direct flight between the two. And I was only planning to do that for about a year and a half was when we first moved the family back, that was the plan, but it didn't work out that way. Because of the dot bomb that I mentioned earlier. We were trying to take the company public in the year 2000. That didn't work out.
Yep.
And so I wasn't able to hand off the CEO hat when I had thought I was going to hand it off. And I ended up commuting for 10 years.
Wow.
All right.
10 years. That's a long stretch.
And so that was, without a doubt, the hardest sacrifice that I had to make, because no matter which coast I was on, somebody was wishing I was on the other, both good and bad, probably. All right.
Yeah.
But, it worked out. It really worked out because I'm really blessed with a very strong family, especially my wife, Krista, who stood by me through those really challenging times.
Yeah. And, that's great you said that, because I was just about to follow up with, how did that impact your family personally?
It was hard. It was more than a little hard. All right. Because especially as a dad, we had three young kids at that point. And, I'm on the road 12, 14, 15 days a month for years. That was very, very hard. And there are too many entrepreneurs. I have a lot of entrepreneur friends. So you can imagine, over the course of helping so many entrepreneurs with what TriNet does, and then stuff I've now been involved with since, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, and I see far too many entrepreneurs putting all of their time and energy just in their business and not seeing their family life slip away.
Yeah.
There's far too many entrepreneurs that end up divorced, all right? Or, and have kids that are no longer close to them.
Yeah.
And so even by the time I started that commute, I had some sensitivity to that. And that was hard. It really was hard. But figuring out how to sort through it and keeping an eye on what's important and being aligned with my wife and my kids, and my kids still like to hang out with me. So
That's good to hear.
It all kind of worked. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great, Martin. So leading into another question I had for you, what did you do to better cope or manage with this intense work-life balance that you were dealing with during this time and still are?
So, it is specifically about not losing sight of the priorities. As I mentioned, it's like I made a commitment that my family was more important than the work. That's why I made the decision to relocate. And so I voted with my feet, and that was my decision. And fortunately, was able to make this extended commute work because I made it the priority, and I had a supportive family, including extended family in my home area of upstate New York that also helped. But keeping aligned with my partner.
Yeah.
Those were really the key things.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you.
Do you regret any of your career-defining decisions?
Do I regret any career-defining decisions? I don't. I don't look back with regret at any of those decisions. I mean, not to say that I never made mistakes. Believe me, I made some huge mistakes. Okay, there's definitely some things I would do over. But one of the things I can share about decisions that don't work out like we had planned is that when we make mistakes, if we learn from the mistakes, then it helps us make other decisions that are bigger sometime downstream. So I've made enough mistakes and learned from them that it's like some of the things I did later on kind of worked out.
Yeah.
Because I kind of learned earlier what didn't work. Okay.
Yep.
So
they turned into lessons.
Yeah. So I've been lucky, that I kind of worked through some things that were really hard, and I was frustrated, and it wasn't going well. Believe me, the business did not take off like a rocket ship when we started, as I told you. And within 2 years, we were about to go out of business. It was really a struggle.
Yeah. And
that set me up for things that I learned how to do later on. Those struggles, including I was the only sales and marketing person of the company for the first 6 years.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think that's good to hear because a lot of students and people in general getting into business or entrepreneurship sometimes don't understand it. You got to fail to move forward sometimes, and you know everything kind of has a lesson in your failures. So that's great.
You gotta throw darts at the board until one hits. When did money stop mattering? Pivoting.
Well, when it comes to money, I should probably point out that the best entrepreneurs, at least that I know, don't become an entrepreneur because they think it's about the money.
Right.
Entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs because we see a problem that we think we are uniquely qualified to solve. We see the current reality of something on the one hand, and over here we see something that we think is possible, and then say, we're going to fill this gap. Where other people looking at the same fact set, the same current reality, the same possibilities, other people say, that'll never work. The entrepreneurs are the ones that are crazy enough to do it. That's what powers the most successful entrepreneurs. So people that say, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to make a lot of money, I'd say, there are easier ways to make a lot of money. It's like go into real estate or go into financial services and learn how to make investments easier. So I'm really worried about money. On the company side, I'll say that when you're running a company, you worry about money a lot. Don't get me wrong, okay?
Yeah.
But you're worrying about it on behalf of what makes sense for the company.
Right.
And then because I was so focused on what I mentioned earlier of driven by how are my investors going to get their money back? How are my team members going to feel like their time with the company was worthwhile, including financially, not just fun, but also financially.
Yeah.
I knew that if I stuck to those two goals, I would be just fine. I wouldn't have to worry about anything because if the investors made money and the team members made money, I'd be just fine. So I never really worried about, once we got through the survival stage, I wasn't really worried about money.
Great.
That's great. What are the different things you had to come to terms with as you became a more influential person?
I don't know whether I'm really influential or not. I'd be the last to say that. But I will say that if you have a lot of resources, I don't mean just financial, but if you have this luxury of, I don't have to work for a living, so I really get to do whatever I want, that's a luxury.
Yeah.
And if you get to that situation, then at least I feel, there is this need to think hard about, well, what is it I want to be doing? That is, it's not about making any more money. It's about what is the impact I want to have. Okay. And when you can do anything, there's a lot of things you can do. All right. So
Yeah.
entrepreneurs that want to keep starting things, it's challenging. Albeit last week I spent a little bit of time at Necker Island. I got to meet Richard Branson and at Necker Island. And Sir Richard, I got to tell you, he makes me feel like I'm standing still. Right? The guy has created 200 entities, nonprofits and commercial businesses.
That's
200. All right.
That's great.
Now I'm no Richard Branson, but I'm saying there's a lot to be said for how can you kind of juggle a bunch of things and still have fun, because this guy also has fun. So I learned a few things from that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. All right, so kind of switching it up now. I wanted to ask you, what are three most important qualities, maybe three or four, or skills that you look for in a new hire coming aboard one of your teams?
All right. I'd say in general, what we look for is the fit with our core values, and we
Yeah.
did it a few different ways. But before we get to a couple of the key core values, let me say that finding people that can both learn and act independently is really important, because at the speed that business is moving, the days of being able to be handheld and being trained and then handheld in being told what to do every day, those days are gone. All right. There's just too much change happening too fast. So the people anybody wants on their team are those that know how to learn on their own and know how to act on their own, but still within the parameters of what makes sense. So that's number one.
Yeah.
The second thing that we look for is the person curious?
Yeah.
Because the people that are curious, as evidenced by their willingness to ask questions for stuff that they don't know, right?
Yeah.
People that are intellectually curious is usually a good sign. And especially in your generation now, where you got so much attention focused on what's on the keyboard and what you're doing on the phone, the ability to socialize and interact with others in an effective way becomes even more important. It's a way to stand out from your peers. Okay. So then the third one would be, does the person give first?
Nice.
And I've written about that in the book More Good Jobs, because that's a value that I try to run across different things that I get involved with. And giving first means not looking at an interaction with someone on a transactional basis. All right, saying, all right, I'll spend time with you until I figure out if you've got something that can help me. And if I think you got something that can help me with, then I'm really going to give you some more attention.
Right.
All right. So, everyone is a taker to some extent. We're all interested in getting help from others. And we all have a chance to give some help to others. So you might say we're all a mix of being a giver and a taker.
Yeah.
And, my experience has been that, the people that are really more of a giver, are evidenced that by saying, hey, I'm curious, I'll ask you some questions, I'll learn some more, and let me see if I can help you with this. Can I, and actually offer in some fashion to give something is an important quality. So we look for people that give first.
Great.
And I'll actually throw on a bonus one now. All right.
Let's hear it.
I find this all the time, but here's a bonus one. So we'll go more than three. So the bonus one would be, can we find somebody that has evidence of overcoming adversity because of their perseverance? All right. Either adversity or really doing something that would be a notable success in anything. All right. It could be athletics. Heck, I used to play chess. All right. And got to be kind of good at it. All right. And so how a person can achieve something of significance that required a long-term commitment or to overcome adversity, it's the showing of progression that's important.
Yeah.
So when we find that, then that's also something that we value.
It's great. Thank you. I know we're running out of time here, but I wanted to ask you one more question. I think it's an important one. So could you just tell us, 3 or 4 books that you wish you had read by your senior year in college that might have given you a smoother start or some more insight on how to get quicker to where you are now?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts there. And none of these were available at the time that I graduated from Shippensburg, but I wish they were. This one I happen to have right here. It's called The Book of Beautiful Questions by Warren Berger. The tagline for the book is "The Powerful Questions That'll Help You Decide, Create, Connect, and Lead." And it's so well written that besides just going through it once, it can really serve as a useful reference guide, depending on, hey, I'm about to have a conversation with an investor. They'll actually find some prompts on, well, what kind of things might you want to keep in mind for that conversation, all right?
Yeah.
Especially if you follow my earlier remark of be curious, all right, and give first.
Right.
So all kinds of really good insights to help you make decisions including analysis of yourself, questions you ask yourself, make decisions, create things. What kind of things should you create? How do you connect with people? And how do you lead?
Great.
Second book that I recommend is called Hidden Potential. This was a recent book written by Adam Grant, who's an industrial organizational psychologist out of University of Pennsylvania,
Okay.
Wharton School. And, you know, over my entire career, the area of HR that I'm technically the most competent in is assessment. And so I put a lot of time and effort learning how can I help make sure I'm picking the right people to go on the team, and how can I help the company, managers of the company, do that when I'm no longer around, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm kind of a nut about this stuff. And Adam Grant, in his book, had so many good insights about this that it's actually changed my perspective on several aspects of assessment, how to build teams. It's just really well written.
Wow.
There's a lot of stuff in there also to help any of us that get stuck in a rut. How do you get unstuck from the rut
Yeah.
that you're in? So highly recommended.
Great.
Third book that I wished I had seen is a book called Meet 100 People, written by Pat Headley,
Okay.
who used to work for General Atlantic, a TriNet financial sponsor. And so this book is a how-to guide to the career and life edge everyone's missing. And specifically what she's referring to is, how do you start getting out there and meeting people, some of which are going to help you? And can you set a goal to meet 100 new people in the next 6 months? Well, you can
Yeah.
set a goal, but if you don't have the track to run on to do that, it can be really hard, especially when you're first getting out of college and you're in a place like Shippensburg, where you look at the immediate local area and say, there's not a whole lot of people around here that might be familiar with things like AI or other things that you could be working on.
Right.
And in fact, having a track to figure out how do you find the right people, you'd be surprised. There are probably some right in your area that you don't know about. So those are my 3 books that I recommend.
That's great. Thank you for that. And that's all I have for you today, but I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure getting to know you and hearing about your journey and your experiences. I just thank you for getting on with us today and appreciate your time, Martin.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I owe a lot to Shippensburg. It all happened there. That's also where I met my wife, Krista. And without Shippensburg and the role that she's played, none of this would have been happened to allow it for me to come back and be interviewed by you. So my best to you, the CEO Club, and the Diller Center. And I look forward to my next visit to Shippensburg and meeting some of you in person.
Great, Martin.
That'd be great.
And hey, I had one more thing for you. I would love to get a copy of your book for each of my students in my club. I just wanted to see the best way to do that, whether it's through Amazon or if you had any other way that would be good. But
so how many do you need?
I would love to get 70 if we could do that.
We can handle it.
Okay.
I will get some to you, and then the surplus that you can leave with Don, okay?
Great.
For use at the Diller Center, if he's interested.
Okay. And we can get that purchased through the foundation as well.
I'd be happy to make a contribution by sending these books.
Great, Martin. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, and you have a great rest of your day.
All right. Same to you. Bye now.